Okay, well, good morning, everybody. I'll talk to the
They should all be able to hear you. We got the okay from Anna.
thumbs up from everybody. We can hear the audio. Fantastic. Okay, well, thanks for joining us. This is our 8th stakeholder meeting, so we're glad to have you here. I'm going to give a quick introduction to the project. We are, actually, we could probably introduce ourselves since we're a small group. My name is Tony Kellen. I'm with Wendell, and we are the design team, and we are here gathering information for the two projects. And so I wanted to let Scott, Taryn, and Susan introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Susan Sherwood. I am a principal at Wendell and I'm also the project manager for this project.
And I'm Scott Neal. I'm a principal with Wendell, and I am your project architect.
I am Taryn Kroll. I am an architect with Wendell who will be helping Scott with the development of this project.
And then we have the folks from Shockey.
Yes, I'm Ann Frame Herzog. I'm with Shockey Consulting as well as a resident of Lawrence and Lawrence Business Magazine here, so very familiar with Lawrence.
And I'm April Snay. I don't think I'm on your camera, but I'm also here
She's right there.
with Shockey Consulting and went to school here in Lawrence.
And then online we have Adam first.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Adam Michael. I'm the project manager for the city.
And Michael.
Good morning, Michael Davidson. I'm the executive director of Explore Lawrence, the tourism sales and marketing organization for the city of Lawrence and Douglas County.
Perfect. And then we have,
Those are the t-shirts. You should get those behind him though.
those are the t-shirts we
See
need to
behind
get.
his t-shirts behind him. He's got a whole nice bunch of t-shirts.
And we have Gary with us again as well.
Good morning, Gary Ronheimer, Senior Project Engineer with the City of Lawrence. I'm the City Building Engineer.
And then we have Emily.
Sorry, it's muted. My name is Emily Guffey and I'm a business owner in the downtown.
And then we have somebody, let's see, Gary. It says somebody playing with their dog.
That's Emily.
Emily,
We have and Jane,
Emily, you're muted.
and she just introduced herself.
Yes.
Hey there, I'm Sally Zagrai. I'm the Executive Director of Downtown Lawrence, Inc. Hi, Ann.
How are you?
Nice to see you.
Thanks, Sally. Are you also a downtown business owner?
I run the Downtown Business Association.
Oh, okay, great,
Mhm.
thank you. And then Emily, did you want to introduce yourself?
She did. We also have Jane Bateman here too.
Trying to.
Emily Guffey did introduce herself.
Oh, okay, I'm
She's a-
sorry. And then you said.
She owns the toy store.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
And then Jane Bateman.
Jay Bateman.
Jim, is that you?
She's muted.
I would venture to guess it's Jim Bateman. He and his wife Susan own the Yarn Barn downtown.
Okay, and then Kim.
Hi, I'm Kim Onspach, and I am also with Explore Lawrence. As Michael prepares to retire, I am interim director right now.
Okay, I think I have everybody.
So, yeah, I think you got everybody.
All right, thanks for being here. We've got about 55 minutes for this, so appreciate you being here. Our immersion this week really is to get all the input we can from all the different stakeholders on what you want to see in these two projects. And so just to go quickly, our mission for this first phase of the project is number one, to solidify the program elements, what's all going to be included, and do some concept designs, which eventually will land on one for the multimodal facility, which is going to be 10 city bus slips, 2 intercity bus slips, approximately a 5,000 square foot facility, waiting area, and so forth, and amenities out at Bob Billings Parkway and Crestline Drive near the university. So the city and the university are obviously big partners in that. And then the second element of the project is we're looking at five. We probably narrowed that by now actually down to 3 properties downtown where we can have a smaller transfer center with limited amenities, shelter covering, 5 bus slips maximum. And so with that, we would love to hear your input, your concerns, and or any information that you want to share in regard to either one of those projects. So I'll stop talking and let the folks on the call start sharing.
This is Michael Davidson from Explore Lawrence. In regard to the downtown location, have you identified potential locations at this point? And if you have, can you share that?
Yes, we have identified 3 locations on Vermont Street. I want to say one between 7th and 8th, and 8th and 9th, and 9th and 10th. The location between 8th and 9th, I believe, is one that we've are thinking is possibly not going to work.
Yeah, so shift that 1 block, Tony. 8th and 9th, 9th and 10th, 10th and 11th.
Okay, I'm sorry. You want to say that again, Adam, just for clarity?
Yeah, so on Vermont, the 800, 900, and 1000 block.
Okay. And
And
so
there's also a couple locations on.
Yeah.
Right, and then 2 locations on, one by the farmer's market on New Hampshire, thank you. And then the other one is which block of New Hampshire is the second one farther south?
Yeah, so the 700 and 800 blocks of New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be the 2 on.
Thank you. Only had a couple of days to get up to speed on locations here. But anyway, so we're gonna have some more information on that coming up actually tomorrow morning. But so we're looking at basically those parking lots, Michael. And to the extent that we can, the least impact as possible on the parking lots.
You talked about limited facilities there. Is there opportunities for restrooms at any of the downtown locations?
At this point, we've had some interesting feedback. Obviously, we, as a first priority, we have to take care of the operators that are coming in and out of there on their routes because they need some type of a facility to be able to have that as part of their workday. Secondarily, there are some real challenges with the footprint that we're looking at to try to provide that amenity for the general public. One of the discussions that we had in one of the meetings yesterday was a discussion around how in some communities, the business community, the city, and the transit agency have jointly figured out a way to provide space not only for the bus patrons, but also the downtown shoppers in strategic areas. So I don't know if that's a possibility to be looked at for the future, but I don't know if Adam, if you want to comment further, but the scope for the downtown is pretty limited now that there's a direction to move the multimodal out of the downtown area to Bob Billings. There's somewhat a much more limited focus on transferring down.
I guess I'd be interested to hear what downtown businesses think about public restrooms. There were some real challenges with what Parks and Rec trying to manage the restrooms over by the library that are in the parking garage over there this last fall and winter. With having those open to the public, there were just some real challenges without those being supervised or attended by anyone. So there are some communities that have like downtown or urban general public restrooms, and I've seen models where those are staffed with like an attendant or somebody who can kind of oversee or be aware of the use of those. We haven't committed resources, like staffing resources, to that type of operation. So as Tony mentioned, we've talked a lot about ensuring that drivers and their layovers have a place to go in and out, but have had trouble confidently programming a public option, but would be interested to hear what downtown businesses and folks think.
Well, Adam, you and I discussed it in the earlier informational meetings that would be great. I do think that I'm sure there were issues with the library garage restrooms.
Just lost you there.
You got real quiet there, Sally.
Yeah.
We can hear her typing a lot louder than we can hear anything else.
Try it again, Sally.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Still very, very quiet, very faint.
Okay, hang on.
I think what I heard her say is that you had an earlier conversation with her as you were doing your outreach before we arrived. And you were sharing with her, she was sharing with you the concerns with the restrooms that you just mentioned in the parking ramp. Or parking lot, or whatever, however you refer to it.
Yes, so let me fix my sound here.
Any left there? No.
Yeah, if you're talking, Sally, we cannot hear you at all.
At all.
No. Can't hear you.
She may have to log out and log back in.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh,
Yes.
Hey.
Crap.
We can hear you, but maybe you can't hear us now.
That's right. That's exactly it. We can hear you, Sally.
We can hear you, Sally.
Okay, she said she'd be back in a sec.
Okay. Great, anybody else? And Bonnie, you're new to the call. You want to introduce yourself since we're,
Sure. I'm sorry for my tardiness. I just came from another meeting. My name is Bonnie Lowe. I'm the president and CEO of the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for having me today.
Welcome, Bonnie.
Bonnie, we've been discussing the downtown transfer location primarily. Just, the program was somewhat limited. We're looking at 5 bus slips with the multimodal focus being moved over to Bob Billings and Crestline. It's, the footprint is much more limited in downtown. We're looking at 5 sawtooth slips. We're looking at 5 different locations in downtown on Vermont Street and on New Hampshire, 3 on Vermont, 2 on New Hampshire. And we're, working on potentials for those, trying to do the least amount of impact on parking. And with the scope of it, not a lot of amenities, passenger overhead, canopies, things like that for the elements, windscreen, that type of thing. But any thoughts or anything that you want to share from from your perspective on downtown and about anything?
Yeah, let me listen a little bit and play catch up. It would be nice to have some amenities. I think that's a great observation. But I'll just listen for now and chime in if that's okay. Let me catch up.
Sorry, we keep losing our lighting here because we're not moving around enough, so.
We're doing our jumping jacks.
Every 7
see
minutes.
us.
our
Also,
lights
also
We do have
Lisa
some-
Larson joined us as well.
Okay, Lisa, you want to introduce yourself too then?
Hi, I'm Lisa Larson with the Lawrence City Commission. Sorry, I'm a little late. My alarm did not alert me like I thought it would that this was starting. So I'm here. It's good to hear what is going on. I know we've been running quite a few of these throughout the last few weeks, and then I think it's a great idea that we're engaging with the community to see how these this works for all of us. Thank you.
Yep, this is, thank you, Lisa. This is our 8th session, our 8th hour of listening.
Yes.
The project, just since yesterday. So appreciate having you here and we look forward to working with the city commission. We do have the sticky notes up on the screen if you can see those of some of the thoughts that have been shared so far. And again, we're just looking for whatever, considerations. Now, somebody said something about amenities downtown.
Yeah, I can't hear you still, Sally.
Another item we've heard a lot of feedback from, and actually this was on our own exploring of downtown, was the users utilizing the buses to get to and from work, especially in the downtown area. So looking at the connection of those sites and where they reside and what type of amenities or businesses would be nearby is also part of consideration that we've been discussing. The accessibility to Main Street from the site has been part of the discussion, as well as obviously in general, making it more of an extension of Massachusetts versus a disconnect on the other side of Massachusetts. So those are just even some other things that we've heard as far as the downtown location we've been keeping in mind through this progress. I didn't know if anybody else had any other thoughts on that as far as from a connection with the users or the community.
Did we lose everybody?
I don't think so. Oh, Adam, you can still hear us, right? Yeah, we can still hear us. Everybody's just being really quiet.
They were very still for a minute there.
All right, can you hear me now?
And Sally's still working on it. You doing better, Sally? Got a new computer?
Can you hear me?
We can't, Sally,
Very
but
faint. When
sometimes.
you unplugged your headphones earlier, we were able to hear you very clear, but then you could not hear us.
So there should be a phone number that you can call in on too. Would there be, Ann?
Yes, it should be.
So sometimes it might help to just try your cell phone, and leave your picture on screen if you want, and so you can see the whiteboard, but then just call us on your phone. Try that as an option.
I guess as we wait for Sally to figure out her tech issues, the bus slips will be in a parking lot or on the street. What is that? What's your thoughts on how that's going to work?
I can one example we talked about as we were walking sites yesterday with the civil engineers and our design group and some folks from with Adam and the city. For example, I believe it's between, is it 10th and 11th, Adam? On Vermont. That's the one that has the longest linear.
In 8th and 9th.
Is that correct?
Between 8th and 9th is the.
Hopefully I'll eventually get these, but on Vermont, for example, Michael, there's a center turn lane that's continuous on the road. And in some aspects, that puts the traffic closer to the parked cars and is actually less safe. So one of the ideas we were kicking around was, we use what's called, in this case, we're probably going to use what's called a sawtooth design, which would allow any of the 5 buses to come in and come out. So if you think of it as the 5 buses at about a 60-degree angle, just in slots at a slight angle along that whole curve or slightly into the curve, into that first row of parking, so that you could have a canopy, you could have the proper area for passengers to move around, bikes to be unloaded and loaded, that type of thing. And then you have overhead cover. You would lose maybe the first row of parking on the lot, and you would lose the on-street parking. And if you got rid of the center turn lane, did some complete streets type initiatives, bumped out curbs at the intersection, put safer crosswalks in, slowed the traffic down, or did things that clearly showed that there was activity in that area. You could possibly even diagonal parking on the other side of the street, get rid of that center turn lane and limit the amount of parking that's lost. You wouldn't necessarily, you wouldn't go into the parking lot and just eliminate the whole parking lot and dedicate it just for buses. So we're trying to look at options that would have the least amount of impact on parking and then, but yet still be done safely. So that's an example of something that we could do.
Yeah, the intent is to keep the buses on street as much as possible. Obviously with some of the site constraints, depending on the size of street frontage that we have, we might have to look at alternate, ways of accommodating those buses in those sites, which would be coming into the parking lot more than we would initially think of. But in general, it's trying to see what we can accommodate on that street and then moving from there.
Michael Davidson here again. Do you anticipate using all the 5 bus slips at the same time? Or is that just a number, that you just came up with? Because, is there going to be 5 buses there simultaneously?
So
Yeah.
I can talk a little about that, Michael. So some of this is a little bit, is concurrent with our route redesign study that's going on this year. So we do have to be, a little thoughtful of what might be our service in August of 2022 when these facilities open. In looking at, moving the primary site out to Bob Billings and Crestline, where we want the majority of bus transfers to happen, there are just some things about the way our city is set up and the activity that's downtown with businesses and residences that make it hard to imagine all of those routes simply moving out to Bob Billings and Crestline. Just functionally would not make sense for us to take every route that would go downtown and move it all to the new transfer center. So the 5 number really came from us looking at, trying to think about routes that would still operate along the 6th Street corridor, North Lawrence, parts of East and South Lawrence that, making people route from downtown to Bob Billings and then back to somewhere in the south or east part of the city is just not going to be efficient. So that 5 number really came from us thinking about what direction buses might head from downtown. And to answer the other part of your question, yes, the intention would be that they would pulse, so to speak, from downtown the same way they do now. You'd have the ability to connect and transfer between buses up to 5 different routes at the same time from that area. So there's currently 8 routes that do a pulse from downtown. So it'll be limited from that, but still looking at the possibility of 5. I don't know if that helps.
I'm just another question. And again, Lisa, I'm glad you're listening to this too. Is there enough demand to justify all this?
So I'll take a stab at that. In a non-pandemic year, we serve about 3 million rides throughout the year. There are also in a non-pandemic year about 2,000 or a little over 2,000 people a day that transfer in the downtown area. So there is quite a lot of activity when you think about the amount of footprint we would need to transfer that many people, as opposed to, the amount of space a car needs, for example, to transfer one person in and out of that area. So that's kind of what we're looking at is efficiency of mobility, how to move people to and from a very dense area that has a lot of jobs and residences, and do think that a safe, functional transit footprint is critical to having downtown service that serves both businesses and people living down here.
Thank you.
I have a question. This is Lisa again. Have you been working with the downtown master plan folks and what their plan is, how this meshes with that? I know they're getting ready to release their draft report, so I'm curious as to how that is working with what you're planning.
Yeah, that's a good question. We have been interfacing with the staff, working on that and able to provide some comment. I know there's, one of the things that came up in a prior stakeholder meeting with a lot of city staff was downtown master plan and looking at those parking lots along Vermont and New Hampshire as potential development sites, as potential places for permanent farmers market and things like that. So there's been discussions about, we need a certain amount of space for functional transit to occur, but how would that be forward thinking and think about how it would interact with, if we take a small piece of a parking lot, how would the rest of that parking lot potentially be used for infill development or interfacing with something like a permanent farmers market? So those discussions are ongoing, and we've definitely been, providing input to that downtown master plan on how those lots could be used in the future.
Thank you.
Adam, can you hear me now? Okay, finally. When you and I talked a few weeks ago, when we discussed the Vermont Street locations, for instance, in that 800 block, and I know the consideration for the turn lane, etc. I had mentioned, and you and I were, and you said you would investigate a little further about changing parking on the west side of Vermont. Could we change that to angled parking so that even though we're losing a goodly number of spaces on the east side of Vermont, we could add some back on the west side of the street, and then just have those bump out spaces on the corners to allow for the turn lane, kind of like we have on Mass Street.
Yeah, and Tony was describing that earlier. It's a little tough. Part of the purpose of early engagement like this is so we're talking about program elements without, getting ahead of the game and drawing something on paper. But that does create some challenges when we're trying to describe, how something looks. But that is something that the team definitely will look at and think there's some merit to that idea of collapsing that center turn lane, which might buy us some space on the other side, on the west side of the street, for angled instead of parallel, which as Taryn from Wendell was talking about earlier, just thinking of ways like that to limit parking impact. If we're going to take over some spaces, how do we buy some spaces back?
And then for the New Hampshire locations, would the facility be on the east side of the street also?
On New Hampshire, both of those sites looking at the west, so the lots.
Okay, because on New Hampshire there's already angled parking on the east side.
It's true.
So that does work. So I would assume they're the same width, New Hampshire and Vermont, but who knows?
Yeah, and that the team will have their hands full with looking at those New Hampshire sites. I think there are more challenges just with less linear space at those lots. There's some grade challenges, so we'll certainly look at those. But I don't know if Scott or Tony or anyone else.
And then another thing we've also considered is a lot of the parking there, we've heard the feedback that long-term parking is actually something that's more identified as preferred by a lot of the employees and the transit users and commuters into town in order to work downtown. So we're going to look at that ratio of not just replacing parking, but that ratio of incorporating long-term parking versus the 2-hour parking, and maybe making that ratio, part of the solution is making that ratio more appropriate.
I would think any addition, like any parking on Vermont that would be added or, swapped out, needs to be long-term, because the folks who park on that block tend to be business owners and employees, because those have been 5-hour meters for a long time, and I believe they're 10-hour meters now. And there's going to be more demand for long-term parking with all of the changes that have just been implemented with the parking system. And making it more visible. I know that there's signage and things coming, but I think if we can have more long-term parking on those ancillary streets of Vermont, New Hampshire would be great, because that's who's going to complain, or is the person who's parked there every day for 35 years and plugged like 2 quarters, and
Right.
then they don't have their space, and we'll all hear about it. So I wanted to go back and circle about the restrooms. I started to say, I'm sure that there are issues in the bless you, the parking garage, the restrooms on the library lawn plaza, but of course people have been living there. So that's really high use this year. If we're talking about facilities for the drivers, which absolutely we need, we need them. How long, Adam, would you, or is there a sense of, it's the 700 and 800 block, Bonnie, of New Hampshire that they said. Sorry to be so bossy and just take your question. You know how I am. How long do you think somebody would be waiting, a rider would be waiting for a transfer? So that would they, now, you and I, again, when we spoke, I said it is great to it would be great to have, an additional public restroom downtown, because we do get groups who come and then they're dropped off. And I mean, now we have the visitor center downtown in the 800 block of Mass, but there aren't, a million places for people to go. But I am curious as to how long you think some of the passengers might be waiting, to whether they would need a facility.
Yeah, so depends a little bit on how we schedule service, but a good rule of thumb for transit is about 10% layover for each trip. So if you've got a 60-minute loop trip, which a number of our routes are from the downtown area, you would look for at least 6 minutes of layover for the driver to have a little recovery time and be able to make transfers between buses that are trying to get there at the same time. Functionally, it can be a little different than that. Due to different times of year or traffic along certain streets. There are some routes that tend to have tighter turnarounds. They only have a minute or two. There are others that maybe have 10 or more. So it can be a little bit of a range, but I would say between 5 and 10 minutes is probably what we'd be aiming for how long 5 buses would be sitting there before they'd all head out again.
Adam, Michael Davidson here. As I was thinking about this, on football weekends, will these locations replace where people traditionally pick up the bus from downtown to go to the stadium?
That's a good point. Probably so. It would make sense to, so we run for football days, we essentially run a altered Route 11 that goes by the football stadium. So it's one of those, it says football shuttle on the marquee. It's pretty much our Route 11, except we go over by the football stadium instead of around it. So I think it would make sense for us not to have if we've got a great new, safe, functional transit area, I'm not sure why we'd try to have a bus picking up or laying over for periods of time in spots that are less convenient than that.
Thank you.
Adam, this is Sally again. So to piggyback off Michael's question, are we still running the shuttles for football? I know one is at 9th in New Hampshire, and are we doing one in the 700 block of Vermont as well, or just the one?
This last year was pretty limited because of
Right.
lower attendance availability and different things. So we'll have to see how that comes back. By the time I think attendance is back where it needs to be, I think we'll have a new facility downtown. I'm not sure this upcoming year will be.
But were we having two?
There was a couple locations, I believe, that they were getting picked up. I think they were also trying to facilitate people who use the riverfront garage and using that to.
Yeah, that's what I'm
ride
thinking
over.
about, is if it's all driven to one pickup location, what does that do? Are we spreading out their parking enough? The people
Yeah, I
coming
think
to the games, because that is a big impact on our other visitors,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, the messaging would continue to point people towards the parking garages. And I think if we're in an area that's within a couple blocks of both the New Hampshire and Vermont garages, that would be the encouragement we'd try to take from a mobility perspective. Please park in these big garages that are close walking distance to where you can pick up the bus.
Okay.
Always chasing human behavior though, so it's
right.
Any more questions for them? The program perspective?
I'm interested in, what other kinds of questions have you asked other groups, or what other kinds of things have come up that maybe we're not, because we're kind of a small group here, that maybe we're not bringing up or addressing, or.
Absolutely. Some of the things that have come up is obviously thinking about, charging spots for the users that would be maybe to charge their cell phone in order to make sure that they can have their phone access the route and the online connectivity to make sure they're, cell phones right now are critical in everyday life. So charging that. Some of the other things we've heard obviously is the accessibility for the users onto the site, which is integral. Making sure there's enough width for the loading and the bus loading, or loading on and off the bus to not affect pedestrian traffic, and give them the nice wide space so that you can do those two items at once, whether it be walking by or loading the bus. Some other things that have also come up have been thinking about wind screening and protection of the elements for those that might be waiting for the bus. Obviously on your windy days and days like today, a 10, 15, even 30-minute wait can be a little bit unbearable, and leading to maybe loitering around other locations or storefronts or whatever in order to just get out of the elements. So those are kind of things that we've heard, particularly from users, that would make it more beneficial for them in the design.
I don't know if the Wendell team wants to also maybe touch on some of the discussions around passive surveillance and safety and different things like that have come up.
Sure. And so another aspect too is providing a safe solution with all this, right? And that's where the restrooms conversation has been a little tough to tackle. But at the end of the day, so we use techniques, design techniques, to provide safety and also aid in crime prevention. And what that means is looking at the proper lighting, let's say down lighting, so that somebody could have a clear sight path for 30 feet and identify, safe path ahead of them, maybe identify individuals ahead of them and decide whether or not they want to continue on their path or take an alternate route. Some of the other things we've looked at is safe landscaping techniques, allowing for clear visibility, but yet shading or low perimeter landscaping techniques that give the essence of boundaries to help coordinate where people might go on their natural paths. Other things are, of course, cameras or use of security systems, protocols in order to make sure people feel safe. So definitely lighting, security, landscaping, these are all techniques that we utilize in giving that safe, open environment and inviting at the same time.
Yeah, one other thing to add is activating the site with additional people. And we view the bike trail system, and looking at the master plan, which is what we had, Karen and I were looking at it earlier. There's two things that are interesting about the Pavilion site. Is one is the east end's a gateway, considered a gateway to the university, and the other one is the west side's the terminus of the bike trail. So there are big plans for this area. So the more people we can get there, the more activity will be there. By activating the site, you can drop crime. Crime doesn't like spectators, so I think there's a lot of opportunities here.
I might also just add to that discussion that staff is looking at more active security and how we might be able to plan for kind of eyes on the street in the downtown area. There was a pretty successful downtown ambassador program this last summer with cleaning up downtown area and things like that. I think there are some potential options where we could have not like an armed guard, but a security person who might also be able to offer helpful downtown information and point people to the right bus and where they can get something to eat and that sort of eyes on the street that it's tough for our bus operators to really do, consistently throughout the day. Something like that might also help, deter activity before it happens, or be the person who can get in touch with PD when we need to or have to.
And have you had any conversations with the local police department about a satellite office at the facility? We see that pretty common.
Our discussions with the police department so far have been kind of along the lines of what I was just discussing. Could off-duty police officers help us with that type of service? I don't know that resources on their end exist to commit to full-time at that location, given their other work. But those discussions like that are certainly ongoing on how we can work cross-departmentally in that way.
And honestly, like Scott was alluding to earlier, activity is key, and also natural policing. Like as soon as a lot of the community starts seeing that it's an asset to their community, and they actually value that asset, and we make it so that they hopefully are proud of what the final product is. The community tends to really, stand near those assets and make sure it's something that's just not seen as a dumping ground or a place where crime should happen. Natural policing starts to happen by people just being there, and coming and going and being legitimate users. So that's also another thing, making it more of a continuously active place also does that as well, which is something that we hope to include by different modes and fashions of use.
And I just see the note from Jim in the chat. Just the concern for retail customers and loss of parking. We had touched on a couple of ideas on how we can mitigate parking challenges, but I don't know if anyone on Wendell wants to circle back to that or touch on different ways we're thinking about reducing the impact on parking if we're taking some lot space.
Yeah, I can take that on, Adam. One of the things that's curious is there are center turn aisles on Vermont that don't they don't seem to do a lot other than you sort of have a left-hand turn into those parking lots, but we didn't see enough. I guess the question is, are those really needed? One could argue they're not really safe because you have oncoming traffic possibly competing on those. So that's one key thing here is that the street's naturally wider than it needs to be, based on what we saw. The site, yeah, the site between 7th and 8th on Vermont, that
8th and 9th. Yeah.
I'm sorry, 8th. One second, I'm zooming out. 8th and 9th, right. No, I keep wanting to go north with the streets, and I don't know why. But between 8th and 9th on Vermont, that is in fact long enough to accommodate everything on the street. So there would be no spaces other than the street parking taken away. And then, so if you follow the logic, you know, for instance, on that one, we look at what happens if we take away the center turn lane and introduce diagonal parking, what would happen there? So those are some of the things we're looking at. I don't think this is a given that you're losing parking. If anything, what we're seeing as potentially unsafe conditions could be mitigated, or unnecessary conditions could be mitigated, and parking could be actually improved. Not in all instances, but in some, but that's our task at hand, is to go through those scenarios. And so we'll be looking at each one of those sites over the next couple of days on what could happen. I will say some of them, especially on New Hampshire, in my mind, seem too short. They just don't accommodate the turning radii that we need. If we do have to go on site and not on the street anymore, that's another complexity of area that we need. So those are just some of the things of the building blocks that we're looking at. You know, buses turning occupies a lot of space.
I'll volunteer that if you, when you're looking at your sites, if you would like my accompaniment, I'd be happy to accompany you and kind of try to anticipate some of the issues that I already know about.
So from this group's perspective, is it better to be completely, I mean, I guess my assumption and what I said is that on the street's better than introducing them to the lots themselves. But how do you folks see it?
Absolutely. We're already getting, you know, people are making they're trying to get used to this new parking system, and believe it or not, there's still a common opinion that is voiced regularly that we don't have enough parking downtown. So those of us who have learned about these things know that we have plenty of parking downtown. But I think those lots, they are very convenient, and there are businesses that have rear entrances that makes it very convenient for customers and helps the business, even if it's not necessarily a customer. It's somebody who's maybe parks in back and walks through, and then they become a customer. So I think if we can keep it on the street, I think it would be much better. And especially when you're talking about, well, obviously the whole construction, and never mind, the construction of the structure is going to bring, you know, different closures and things like that. But I think that, for instance, that lot between 8th and 9th on Vermont, you know, if you were to construct in the lot, then you're really taking up a lot of ancillary parking around where the construction site is, which makes it really hard on people, on businesses, and on people who are used to parking there, who want to park there.
Hey, Adam, this is Nate Will. I don't know if this is directed towards you or in the downtown community. Has there been any like pre-COVID parking studies done for the area? Talking for like density rates during the hours and all kind of stuff. If you have that information, it'd be really helpful, I think, for us. I know it might be the information you provided us, Adam. I just haven't seen it yet. So.
Yep, we can circle back to the 2018 parking study that has quite a lot of.
I know right now it doesn't
so,
really count. So.
Yeah, we'll make sure you have that information so you can
Okay.
see the different.
Thank you.
Rates.
And just for everybody on the call, Nate is with HG Consulting out of Kansas City. And they have-
Sorry, forgot to introduce myself.
No, that's
I
right.
didn't know he
He's-
was there.
We have, there are civil consultants on the team with us, and they have a local presence also with one of their employees. So, know the area.
Adam, can you, it's Michael Davidson again. The area adjacent to the library, was that not considered at all? That there's sort of been a natural thing of buses in that area. Has that not been considered for a facility in and around the library?
Right surrounding the library creates some challenges. So our current challenge, just being just east of the library there, is just being right in front of businesses, not having room for passenger amenities like a canopy and sawtooth bus bays, safe operations in that area. I know there's been prior discussions about a lot of the jaywalking that occurs there, and can we get a mid-block crosswalk, which is complicated by the entrance and exit to the parking garage, which makes mid-block crossings there pretty tough. So where we currently are on the east side of the 700 block is really hard to figure out how to be compatible next to the climbing gym and AT&T who are there, who've been good partners throughout this, but would be a challenge if we try to do something more permanent. Right adjacent to the library, north side or the west side of the library, those are also complicated spaces. The north side just does not have the linear space, and is also, the parking right around the library on the north side and the immediate east side of it is part of that library site plan. So, affecting the parking and trying to put in something more permanent there could be challenging, trying to figure out how that site plan would get revised. And
but currently, Adam, at any given time, currently there's like 4 or 5 buses lined up there, right? Am I wrong in that? When I walk by it, I see a bunch of buses lined up there. So why
Right,
isn't
so
that
we-
area not being considered? Because it already
Right, so
seems
we-
to be a natural.
Yeah, so we currently have 8 buses that lay over at that location. There are significant constraints with the amount of space, the sidewalk space that's needed there for passengers to interact, and not having amenities like a canopy or seating underneath that. There are frequent concerns from the businesses that are directly adjacent to us, and just bus operations right in front of the businesses that are there. So those are some of the challenges that we're looking at. We really only have space for that, parallel to the curb type parking for our buses. One of the functional challenges to that is each bus route might be in a different location every day because it's first one in, first one out. You need a lot of room for a bus to taper into a space and then taper out as it pulls out of that type of configuration. So really getting to a sawtooth bay, a place where a bus can enter and exit regardless if there's another route in the area, is critical to on-time performance and a good passenger experience. So there's just a lot of issues with trying to locate the amount of space we need directly adjacent to buildings with businesses, which is kind of why we're looking at some of these lot areas that have a little bit of room to bump and create that.
Yeah. My thought is that if it's, there might be some objections to businesses that are currently there, but if you're going to build a whole new facility, you're just going to create more complaints. Can that, is there any way to figure out how to make that space work? Because again, from my perspective, when I walk up and down and I go to the library, I go to the post office, they're there and they don't seem to be too disruptive to me in a sense. So can that area be enhanced to meet some of the needs? And it seemed to be it wouldn't be as large of an expense to create that space. But again, I'm not an expert. I'm just throwing out my opinion of a space that seems to work. And again, it's close enough to the downtown. It's close enough to the library, which does provide restrooms and things like that.
Okay, Michael, thank you so much for all those comments. We've been doing these facilities for about 40 years, and we've been in 38 states. And so we appreciate your comments, and it is a challenge. What they have there right now is a very minimalist solution, and give us a few days here to show you what types of things communities like yours have done successfully to modernize their downtown transferring situation. We do have another meeting at 11, so we are going to have to stop here. It's 1 minute before the top of the hour. But again, Michael, we do appreciate your comments, and Sally as well, and everybody else that's contributed on the call. We're very mindful of all the things that have been shared. And this will all be part of what we're contemplating as we look at design and solutions for downtown. With that, I think we do need to go if you have other comments. I know Adam has an open and is open to suggestions. Sally, were you waving goodbye, or did you have another thing you needed to say?
I also put my email in there. You can email Adam and he'll always make sure we get stuff. But if you want to email me directly, I put my email in there. We'll make sure that anything you add or comments will get distributed to the whole team. So
something else I do want to share is we do have 2 public meetings tomorrow, one from noon to 1:30 and also one from 6 to 8 p.m. You probably have that information. If not, you can request that from Ann by email. If you have other business owners or folks that want to attend that as well, if they haven't had an opportunity to attend any of these meetings so far, we would encourage that as well. I don't think we have any other thing right now, but we have a meeting with the city now at 11 to go over some of the things we've gathered so far just in the day and a half. So with that, thank you so much for all your input. We do appreciate it. And like I say, all this information that we're capturing, we're going to be sharing going forward. We do plan to be back in June for also public hearings that would, or excuse me, not public hearings, public meetings. 2 of them we're anticipating where we'll show the concepts that we've developed for both downtown and for the intermodal. So with that, again, thanks for joining our call.
Nice to meet y'all.
thank you.